I was just checking where I was on my textbook. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. We are studying and retaking IFSE or CSI, Canadian Securities Institute mutual funds, to get back into banking. 45-minute study session. Chapter 3. Studying mutual funds in BC and Canada. Retaking my mutual funds course. It's through the Canadian Securities Institute. Yeah. So I'm doing the rereading chapter 3 right now on economics. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. We go live daily for lunch with me, dinner with me, meditations, workouts, etc. Oh, cool. That's crazy. Right on. Appreciate being here, Reuven. Learning about how inflation is calculated right now. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Right on. Oh yeah, beach picture. Yeah, I love it. It's like got it from Winners actually. So I love that beach picture. Yeah, because I love the tropics. I love um nice like tropical like destinations like Mexico or Hawaii and stuff. Nice. Yeah, right on. All right. I find verbalizing helps me study as well, so I'm going to do a little verbalization of what I'm reading. Um, just because of copyright, I can't share. I shouldn't share the page of like the textbook. Um, but okay, I'll show you, kind of share with you guys where I'm at. It's talking about inflation. Yeah, no worries. Take care. Accelerating inflation usually brings about rising interest rates and a recession. Thus, high inflation economies usually experience more severe booms and busts than low inflation economies. The causes of inflation. The relationships among the growth rate of money, inflation, and the rate of unemployment are a subject of considerable controversy. An important detriment of inflation is the balance between supply and demand conditions in the economy. Economists use an indicator called the output gap to measure inflation pressures in the economy by looking at the difference between real GDP, what the economy actually produces, and potential GDP, what the economy is capable of producing when its existing inputs of labor, capital, and technology are fully employed at their normal levels of use. Think of potential output as the maximum level of real GDP that the economy can maintain without inflation, increasing. A negative output gap occurs when actual output is below potential output. In this case, economists would say there's spare capacity in the economy. The economy can produce more output because its resources are not being used to their full capacity. Unemployed workers and unused plant and equipment resources can be called into service without impacting wages or prices. Thus, inflation will fall or remain steady. A positive output gap occurs when actual output is above potential output. In this case, economists would say the economy is operating above capacity. The economy is trying to produce more than it can with existing resources. Scarce labor fuels wage increases, and other strains on productive resources place upward pressure on inflation. In general, a positive output gap occurs as the economy moves through an expansion toward the peak. Output continues to expand, consumer income is rising, and this leads to strong consumer demand for goods and services. However, this creates a situation whereby if companies can continue to operate well above normal capacity, they can raise prices in response to the strong demand. In this way, higher and continued consumer demand pushes inflation higher. This state of affairs is called demand pull inflation. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And then disinflation. Just as there are costs associated with rising inflation, a falling rate of inflation can also have a negative impact on the economy. Disinflation is a decline in the rate at which prices rise, a decrease in the rate of inflation. Prices are still rising, but at a slower rate. The potential cost of disinflation is captured by the Phillips curve, which says that when unemployment is low, inflation tends to be high. And when unemployment is high, inflation tends to be low. Interesting. And according to this theory, lower unemployment is achieved in the short run by increasing inflation at a faster rate. Lower inflation is achieved at the cost of possibly increased unemployment and slower economic growth. To gauge the cost of disinflation, uh, So disinflation is just a decrease in inflation, decrease in or a decline in the rate of in which prices rise. But yeah, hit that subscribe button if you guys are new here. Restudying mutual funds course through Canadian Securities Inc. with some binaural beats in the background. Here we go. To gauge the cost of disinflation, the sacrifice ratio is used to describe the extent to which GDP must be reduced with increased unemployment to achieve a 1% decrease in the inflation rate. Disinflation in Canada. Experts suggest that the sacrifice ratio is as high as 4. That is 4% of output must be sacrificed to bring down inflation to 1%. So there may be a considerable cost in lost output in pursuing the goal of lower inflation. This cost can involve a significant period of relatively high unemployment. Deflation. Disinflation, inflation, deflation. So deflation is a sustained fall in prices where the annual change in the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is negative year after year. In fact, deflation is just the opposite of inflation. Falling prices are generally preferred over rising prices. Goods and services become cheaper and our income seems to go a little farther than it used to. Although true in the short term, there are negative consequences of deflation. One view holds that the impact of sustained falling prices eventually leads to a decline in corporate profits. As prices continue to fall, businesses must sell their products at lower and lower prices. Businesses cut back on production costs and wage rates. And if conditions worsen, lay off workers. For the economy as a whole, unemployment rises, economic growth slows, and consumers shift their focus from spending to saving. Ultimately, declining company profits will negatively impact stock prices. As the economy slows and enters a recession, the central bank can use lower short-term interest rates to stimulate consumer and business spending. In 2007, the bank rate in Canada was as high as 4.75%. Bank rate is the rate of interest that the Bank of Canada charges on very short-term loans to financial institutions and is used as a signal of monetary policy actions. During the 2008-2009 recession, the bank rate fell to as low as 0.5% and remained there for more than a year to help stabilize the economy. For Canada, the recession was not as deep as expected, and lower interest rates played a key role in stimulating the Canadian economy. The Bank of Canada, in response to the worldwide pandemic, once again dropped the Bank of Canada rate to 0.5% in March 2020. It remained at 0.5% for more than a year. As of February 2024, it had climbed to 5%. Crazy. How do fiscal and monetary policies and international economics impact the economy? Monetary policy refers to to regulation of the money supply and available credit for the purpose of promoting sustained economic growth and price stability. The goal of monetary policy is to maintain the value of our currency and our economic health. Canada's central bank, the Bank of Canada, uses its influence over short-term interest rates to control changes in the money supply and available credit. External economic developments also have an impact on monetary policy. The duties and the role of the bank are stated in a general way in the preamble of the Bank of Canada Act to regulate credit and currency in the best interests of the economic life of the nation, to control and protect the external value of the national monetary unit, to mitigate by its influence fluctuations in the general level of production, trade, prices, and employment, as far as may be possible within the scope of monetary action and generally to promote the economic and financial welfare of the Dominion. The Act does not specify the manner in which the bank should pursue these objectives, but it and other legislation grants powers to the bank, which are designed to enable it to fulfill its role. While the bank administers policy independently, without day to day government intervention, the thrust of policy is the ultimate responsibility of the elected government. Monetary policy can be either expansionary or contractionary, as defined below. An expansionary policy increases the amount of money and credit available in the economy. Example, if Bank of Canada lowers the bank rate or buys bonds in the market, borrowing will become cheaper and spending will be more attractive to consumers. As a result, more loans will be made and less money will be tied up in investments. These activities will increase the money supply. Contractionary monetary policy decreases the amount of money and credit available in the economy. Yeah. If the Bank of Canada increases the bank rate or sells bonds in the market, borrowing will become more expensive and saving will be more attractive to consumers. As a result, fewer loans will be made. Yeah. Will become more expensive and saving will be more attractive to consumers. As a result, fewer loans will be made and more money will be tied up in investments. These activities will decrease the money supply. Both expansionary and contractionary policies are implemented with the help of the bank rate and cash management techniques as defined below. So a couple more pages in this chapter. What is that? Yo, what's going on? Minimalika? Welcome. Money supply. Yeah. Yeah. Talking about money supply, chapter 3, economics in mutual funds course. Yeah. Yep, that's right. Yeah. So talking about the bank right now. Like talked about COVID and stuff. Yeah. Super cool. It's interesting stuff. But yeah, hit that subscribe button if you guys are new here. I'm gonna start doing live study sessions of me. Got the binaural beats on, no copyright sound for that. And I just find it helps me verbalize my studying when I'm doing it. And then I'm gonna start doing quizzes and stuff like while I have you guys live. So it'll just help motivate me to get it done because I want to get it done quickly. There's 19 chapters. I'm on. This will be the end of chapter 3. I'll be moving on to chapter 4. So I'll take you guys along for the ride. So enjoy. The bank rate. Yeah, the Bank of Canada carries out monetary policy primarily through changes to what it calls the target for the overnight rate. The overnight rate is the interest rate set in the overnight market, a marketplace where major Canadian financial institutions lend each other money on an overnight basis. When the bank changes the target for the overnight rate, other short-term interest rates also usually change. So, because my background's in banking and I started in banking, I'm in insurance right now, but I'm trying to get back to banking. Um, the 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 banks can charge higher interest rates than what the Bank of Canada rate is. So that's what the overnight rate is referring to, if I remember correctly. Because let's say the Bank of Canada rate is 3.5%, the banks can actually be a little bit higher than that because that's their personal rate that they charge out to consumers. Yeah, currently this band is 50 basis points or 1/2 of a percentage point wide. Good. I'm just doing some studying. Uh, each day, the bank targets the midpoint of the operating band as its key monetary policy objective. For example, if the operating band is 1% to 1.5%, then the target for the overnight rate is 1.25%. The target is an important policy tool as it tells financial institutions the average interest rate that the bank wants to see in the overnight market. Changes in the operating band for overnight rates are very important events. They also they may signal a policy shift toward an easing or tightening of monetary conditions in order to meet the bank's inflation control targets. The bank rate is the minimum rate at which the Bank of Canada will lend money on a short-term basis to chartered banks and other members of Payments Canada in its role as lender of last resort. It is closely related to the target for the overnight because the bank rate is the upper limit of the operating band. Continuing with our examples from above, with an operating target range of between 1 to 1.5%, the bank rate is 1.5%. Example, if the Bank of Canada decreases the bank rate, nominal interest rates will also fall. As a result, the money supply will increase. Expansionary policy. And if the Bank of Canada increases the bank rate, nominal interest rates will rise. And as a result, the money supply will decrease. Contractionary policy. Hey, welcome, welcome. What's hype? What's hype makes more money. Yeah, if there's high interest on something, they will increase the basis. Yeah. Yeah. Don't memorize the interest rates. Yeah, no. I'm not memorizing the interest rates. No. Interest rates are subject to change. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. Yeah. But yeah, hit that subscribe button if you're new here. I'm going to be doing live study with me sessions with binaural beats in the background, and I'll be verbalizing it. Just helps me memorize it all. If the Bank of Canada decreases, yada. Cash management, here we go. In cash management or open market operations, a central bank controls its national money supply through the buying or selling bonds in the market. If the Bank of Canada buys bonds in the market, the price of the bonds will rise, causing interest rates to fall. As a result, the money supply will increase. Expansionary policy. The Bank of Canada buys bonds in the market. If the Bank of Canada sells bonds in the market, the price of bonds will fall, causing interest rates to increase. As a result, the money supply will decrease. Contractionary policy. The trend of the bank rate affects both users and suppliers of credit. For example, a rising trend signals a desire on the part of the Bank of Canada to reduce the demand for credit by raising the cost of credit. Administered rates, those rates determined by each financial institution, such as prime rates, usually follow the trend of the bank rate. Drawdowns and redeposits. Drawdowns and redeposits represent a third strategy in defining monetary policy. The federal government maintains accounts with the Bank of Canada and the chartered banks. Drawdowns and redeposits. By transferring funds to or from the Bank of Canada and to or from its accounts at the chartered banks, the federal government can influence short-term interest rates. A drawdown refers to a transfer of deposits to the Bank of Canada from the chartered banks. Drawdown drains the supply of available cash balances from the banking system. This transfer of funds decreases deposits and reserves available to the banks. The result is a contraction in loans to consumers and businesses and an upward pressure on interest rates. A redeposit refers to a transfer of funds from the Bank of Canada to the chartered banks. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Interesting. So the Bank of Canada can borrow because people will have bonds. No exceptionally anymore and less control of bonds. The real value of the bonds also differs a lot from the market value. Yeah. So a lot from the market value based on market conditions. Yeah, no, totally. If there's a war in territory. Yeah. No, they haven't gotten into that. They've gotten into that a little bit, but not a ton. Yeah. Right now it's talking about drawdowns and redeposits and how the Bank of Canada can take out funds from the chartered banks if they need to borrow money, which reduces the supply of the cash reserves of the chartered banks, and then vice versa, and then or they can redeposit and transfer the money back to the bank. Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Do you have a background in finance too? Minimum, minimum. I'm sure you get the law. Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah. Um, I um, I have a like I used to work in the bank, so it's been a while. But I took mutual funds through IFIC, so or sorry, IFSE, IFSE, but they folded, and so now it's all everything's through Canadian Securities Inc. So they have Canadian Securities Course (CSC), and now they have still the IFIC investment funds in Canada um course, but yeah, so it's slightly different, but it's been a while. Oh, in economics, yeah, I had a hard time in economics. I studied hotel management. Oh, interesting. But now just a musician. Sweet. Then when I got into real life with bonds and stuff, I understood it in a bad way. Oh yeah, yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah, but yeah, I worked for three different Canadian banks. PC Financial, which is now Simply. You, now it's called Simply Financial. CIBC, Scotia, and then we'll see who I work for next. So that's three. So I gotta retake this and then see what happens and which one I work for next. Mm, okay, back to it, back to it. But yeah, hit that subscribe button if you guys are new here. I'm gonna try and do this daily so I can get in. But do you use AI or are you? Yeah, I use AI. Yeah, if I distract, gonna leave in a second. No, I use AI for sure. Yeah. Then what do I get? Here's the transfer. Okay, here we go. A redeposit increases deposits and reserves and the availability of funds in the banking system. This transfer of funds places downward pressure on the interest rates and gives banks an incentive to increase loans to consumers. Fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is a deliberate action by the government, federal, provincial, or territorial, to influence the economy through changes either in spending or in taxation initiatives. Similar, similar to monetary policy. Similar to monetary policy, fiscal policy can either be expansionary or contractionary. These categories, these categories of fiscal policy are described below. Expansionary policy. If the government believes that the current economic growth is lower than a specific target level, it may attempt to stimulate the economy. The government may implement an expansionary fiscal policy, which will either increase spending or decrease taxes. If the government believes the unemployment rate is too high, it might cut business taxes to encourage businesses to hire more workers. Mhm. Contractionary policy. If the government believes that current economic growth is rising too quickly, believes the current is rising too quickly. So this one then. Oh, okay, yeah. If the government believes that current economic growth is rising too quickly, it may attempt to cool off the economy. The government may implement a contractionary fiscal policy, which will either decrease spending or increase taxes. Mm. If the government believes that public spending is too high, it might cut public programs such as healthcare spending, even though such cuts may increase unemployment. How fiscal policy affects the economy. Fiscal policy affects the economy in several ways. Spending. Governments can purchase goods or services themselves, such as a new highway, thereby boosting economic activity. Or they can simply transfer money to citizens to spend or save themselves, such as with social security checks. Only the first type is recorded as government spending in GDP. Taxes. The amount of tax collected may vary because the size of the tax base changed. The number of people or companies paying the tax expanded or contracted. also can vary because the tax rate change, so that each dollar of economic activity yields more or less tax. Raising raising tax rates. Uh, Raising tax rates reduces the disposable income of consumers, thereby dampening their spending. The main types of taxes are as follows: direct taxes levied on the income of individuals and companies, sales taxes, including value added taxes such as goods and services tax, and excise tax such as on liquor, payroll taxes levied as a share of wages, capital taxes levied on the size of the company's assets or capital, property taxes levied on residential and commercial property. By using a mixture of monetary policies and fiscal policies, governments are better able to control economic phenomena. Take a 10-minute break and come back with a fresh mind. Yeah, no, appreciate it. Appreciate it, minimal. That's awesome. Yeah. It's been 36 minutes. Yeah, that's basically a Pomodoro. So we'll take 5. Almost done this chapter. Um, Hang on. Oh, I'm so close. Like 1 or 2 more pages, but let's yeah, I'll give you guys a better angle there. Okay. The way I always do my studying is I read the text, and then I'll section it out. So this is the first 3 chapters. That's a section. So they got quizzes coming up. So I'll work on the quizzes tomorrow and see how I do. And I always like to test where I'm at, and then I'll dive deeper on those sections of the text that I struggle with. WSG and W stream, everyone. What's W? WSG. W stream, everyone. I don't know what that means. WSG. Okay. International, and then how's this one? Oh, that one's nice. There we go. Okay. There we go. All right, quick break. I'm gonna dive right into it. What's good and yeah. What's good in Windstream, everyone? Appreciate it, Slink. We just took a little break. We're finishing up this chapter for mutual funds course through Canadian Securities Inc. It's an investment funds course to get mutual funds. So we're retaking that. I'm just finishing up these last 2 pages, and then I'm gonna call it a night. Be a nice little quick study sesh, and then I'm gonna do another one tomorrow. So along with my meditations, I do daily meditations for my community. So if you want to tune into that, I'll be doing that 7:30 a.m. Pacific tomorrow. And then I'll be meditating. Yeah, just on my own tonight. It was a busy day today, so but I'll finish up the rest of this chapter, and then just do streams for this. For this will be like my evening stream for deep study with binaural beats in the background. Okay, I'll finish off this last page in a bit. International economics. International economics deals with the interactions Canada has with the rest of the world, trade, investments, and capital flows and exchange rate. Since the end of the Second World War, the dependence of industrial economies on trade has risen significantly. This is especially so for Canada. Exports of goods and services are approximately 30% of GDP, compared to 20% in the 60s. As a result, the economic performance of our trading partners is also an important determinant of Canadian economic growth. The balance of payments. Balance of payments. Balance of payments is a detailed statement of a country's economic transactions with the rest of the world for a given period, typically over a quarter or a year. The two components of the balance of payments are the current account and the capital and the financial account. The current account records the exchanges of goods and services between Canadians and foreigners. The earnings from investment income. The earnings from investment income and net transfers such as for foreign aid. The capital and financial account records financial flows between Canadians and foreigners related to investments by foreigners in Canada and investments by Canadians abroad. Balance of payments transactions can be thought of as incurring either demand or supply of foreign currency and a corresponding supply or demand of Canadian currency. Current account outflows such as to buy foreign goods or pay interest on debt held by foreigners create a demand for foreign currency to make those payments. Canadian dollars are offered in exchange for this foreign currency unless there's a corresponding demand for Canadian dollars. Think of the current account as what we spend on things and the capital and financial account as what we use to finance the spending. During a given year, if Canada buys more goods and services from abroad than it sells, it will run a current account deficit for the year. It will need to sell more assets to finance the spending, which means running a capital and financial account surplus or go into debt. As an analogy, when an individual spends more than he or she earns, the difference is made up by either borrowing money or selling something of value and using the proceeds to pay off the debt. In this way, a country experiencing a current account surplus is. Oh, yeah, I'm fine with that. Experiencing current account surplus is saving more than it is spending and can lend out this surplus amount to foreigners. What time is it? It is. Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Slink. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. And Chris, it is 10:03 p.m. Pacific, so it's late. I'm just finished on the study session. Yeah. Melody, welcome to the live. Thanks for tuning in. What is it? Doing good, doing good. Good to hear. I'm in Kadir. This guy ain't a real studier, bro. What is bro studying for? Mutual funds. Got the binaural beats on and yeah, just finishing this chapter. $33. We'll see, Elijah. Probably failing your classes. Yeah, that was rude. I deleted that comment. Wow, what? Yeah, the most important component of the current account is merchandise trade, the goods and services we produce and sell abroad and those we import from other countries. A number of factors influence the performance of Canada's trade. The most important is the relative pace of demand in foreign and Canadian economies. Strong growth in US demand for automobiles, raw materials, and other products made in Canada boosts exports. Likewise, strong demand in Canada for foreign products boosts imports. Appreciate it. Oh my God. Good one, Car Venture. Competitive position. The competitive position of Canadian firms in foreign markets and foreign firms in Canada also influences trade. A falling Canadian dollar, for example, lowers the prices of Canadian exports in foreign markets and raises the price of imports in Canada. These are blue light blocking glasses as well for late night studying as well. Appreciate it. Here you go. The competitive, the falling Canadian dollar, for example, lowers the price of Canadian exports in foreign markets and raises the price of imports in Canada. This boosts exports and depresses imports. Those benefits are lost. However, if the price of Canada's goods rises in response to the lower dollar, a rising Canadian dollar has the opposite effect. And foreign markets and raises the price of imports. This boosts exports and depresses imports. Those benefits are lost. Yeah. The capital and financial account. The key difference between current and capital and financial account transactions is that the latter result in an acquisition of an asset and the right to any income it earns. Thus, the purchase of a computer made in Canada is a current account transaction, whereas the purchase of the company that made the computer is a capital and financial account transaction. Current account transaction is a purchase of the company that made the computer is capital and financial. All right, that's chapter 3. And then it's got the summary part. Nice. Chapter 3 review questions. What are these? Nice. All right. We will leave it there. Mindset fam, we will leave it there. Appreciate being here. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. I go live daily for meditate with me, lunch with me. Lunch with me is usually around 12:30, 12:45 p.m. Pacific on my work days. So that'll be tomorrow. And then I'll be meditating in the morning. And yeah, and I'll also be doing another study session tomorrow. So stay tuned. Appreciate you being here and tuning in. Ciao. Nighty night. Don't let the bed bugs bite.